Review copy provided by Nintendo. Thanks, Nintendo! Hello, my terrific friends. Arlo here, and today I'm reviewing Kirby Star Allies. Now, I know I've got a lot of Kirby fans watching my videos, and they get super mad at me whenever I say something bad about Kirby, so that's why you're really gonna enjoy this review. Let's get started. Kirby Star Allies is easily the best game in the Switch's library and an objectively perfect game. And, there isn't even anything else to say about it. I give Kirby Star Allies a perfect score, 7 out of 7. Well, thanks for watching. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed making that one. And if you're a Kirby fan, you could just turn off the video now, because it's over. There's nothing left but one really, really long end crawl. See you later! Are they gone? Okay, look, I'm just a little bit nervous about this review, and that's not because I think this game is terrible or anything. I'm not gonna go all Star Fox Zero on it, but it's far from perfect, and I'm slightly worried about how more passionate and Kirby experienced series veterans might take my review. But let's get on with the show and do the real review now. And if you snitch and tell any of those Kirby fans about it, you're gonna get a serious talking to. Background time. After digging through the old memory banks, I found that I've played exactly 2 Kirby games in my life. Kirby's Dream Land 2 on my friend's Game Boy, and a rented copy of Kirby Superstar, which I played the most. Beyond that, I mained Kirby in the original Smash, but obviously that's not the same thing. So as you can see, I went into Star Allies with a pretty fresh perspective. I can't say I'm an active Kirby fan, but I was very interested to dip back into the series and see where things have gone in the 20 plus years since I gave it a go. And if I'm honest, I think with Star Allies, I found myself delighted and unimpressed in equal parts. To give you an in-depth, detailed story synopsis, there are these gross heart things, and they make guys all boogly. And there are these weird ladies that want the gross heart things, and you've got to fight everybody and keep chasing the gross heart things until you figure out what's the deal with these weird ladies and gross heart things, so the whole universe doesn't go all boogly. As usual, Kirby can suck up bad guys and take their powers, but this time around, he's also got the ability to chuck a heart at a bad guy and turn him into a friend. You can have up to 3 CPU partners at a time, and you don't really have much say in the matter. The game is built around getting help from these partners. More specifically, there are switches to hit and fuses to light and all sorts of stuff that depends on certain elemental attacks. If you hit up on the control stick, your partners will start to interact in compatible ways, sometimes imbuing each other's weapons with elemental attributes and sometimes creating brand new attacks. And one cool thing is that each character can share extra healing items by which is great because it eliminates the frustration of trying not to grab an item you don't need and leaving your buddies out in the cold. The gameplay comes with a bit of a learning curve. For a while, I couldn't quite get the hang of the controls, especially considering each baddie/Kirby form is different. And at first, it was pretty cumbersome trying to manage both Kirby's abilities and each of his teammates and their attacks. After a while, it began to make sense though, and things got smoother and smoother the further I progressed into the game. One great thing is that there are so many enemy abilities, and you can use them to fit your playstyle. It was a lot of fun trying them all out and picking out my favorites and trying to hold on to the good ones for as long as possible. And the different ability combinations are fun to play with too. Then there are these platform things you find, and each one will grant your whole party with some sort of new temporary form of mobility. This wheel is one example, and while they're definitely silly, playing on the simple satisfaction and visual spectacle of squishing a ton of baddies and crashing through loads of rock and whatnot, they're undeniably fun. Basically, the core gameplay is good fun, and it's all held up by a great presentation. The menus and the UI and the animations are all super slick and pleasant, and the game's graphics are often gorgeous. The characters are fine, but the environments and backgrounds are what really stand out here. There are all these wonderful landscapes filled with bizarre shapes, and it gives the game a very magical feel. I'm a little bummed that the developers weren't able to achieve a higher frame rate, but the beautiful visuals do help make up for it. Then the world maps allow you to run around freely Super Mario 3D World style, and while I won't spoil anything, the later worlds use this map in some fun and interesting ways. The music is all very nice. Nothing stands out too much, but it maintains a really steady level of enjoyability throughout the entire experience. So there's a lot to enjoy about this game. But the problem is that it never seems quite as enjoyable as it could be. This is a common theme with Kirby Star Allies. It feels like it just falls short in nearly every category. Nearly every aspect of it just quite doesn't make it. First, let's go back to that gameplay. The whole ability combining thing is fun, but the level design never lets you explore it to its fullest potential. The game toys with the idea of having you figure out how to make something work, and there are some challenges that borderline on puzzle without quite getting there. Instead, it all just boils down to facing an obstacle obstacle, grabbing the powers the game gives you right there and making it happen. It doesn't often take a lot of thought or choice or effort. Then while combat is enjoyable overall, with Kirby on screen along with 3 other baddies as allies plus all the baddies they're fighting, it is easy to lose track of what's happening. Sometimes it's just a confused mash of swinging weapons and it's like, Kirby? Who's Kirby? Never heard of him. And during boss fights, the problem is particularly pronounced. Some of these enemies have attacks that sweep across the screen with all sorts of crazy effects, and some of your allies have moves that produce food, but every time someone eats food, the game momentarily freezes for some ridiculous reason, so the screen is filled with all this crazy stuff and everyone is bouncing around everywhere and you don't know what's going on and you're trying to fight, but the game is pausing over and over again. These moments are relatively brief, but they're really uncomfortable while they last. Another problem is partner AI. They'll often perform pretty well, choosing the right abilities to combine for a situation and fighting enemies on their own, but they're not very good at avoiding harm. You'll be navigating around some hazard or another and all your partners will just try to push straight through and take a bunch of damage all the time. While I did end up getting used to the controls for the most part, one thing I didn't get used to was the dashing. If you just press the control stick in a direction, you'll only walk. In order to run, you've got to give it a very conscious and purposeful quick tap or double tap. Double tapping made perfect sense when all we had was a D-pad. It's a way to have 2 different speeds with only one type of input. But now with a control stick, I don't care what anyone says, this is purely unintuitive. In all my time with the game, it never stopped annoying me at best and causing me to take unnecessary damage at worst. I was constantly trying to head in a direction, realizing I was only walking, then having to stop and tap the stick faster, because decades of gaming with a control stick have taught me that when I push in a direction all the way, I should just go in that direction at top speed. It's a constant issue that just doesn't need to exist. I've complained about having to hold a run button in some modern Mario games, but I would take a run button over this any day. None of that matters too much though because of Star Ally's very, very low difficulty. This game is, pretty darn easy. If you were scared off by the demo, which took almost 0 effort to beat, it's definitely better than that, so keep that in mind at least. Some of this easiness is thanks to the AI partners who love to just rush ahead and kill everyone for you, leading to the occasional feeling that the game is kinda just playing itself for you. It was maybe halfway through the game that I felt I had to actually start trying, learning enemy attacks and actively trying to avoid them instead of just, spamming my attacks. And right when it started to reach a more satisfying level of challenge, the game ended. It was so close to hitting that perfect level, even if just in the last world, but that was a punch the developers decided to pull. Lots of people tell me that Kirby games have historically been pretty easy, and it's clear that Nintendo really wants to attract kids to the series, but it's a little harder to forgive considering how incredibly simple it would be to make a harder mode. Enemies do a little more damage, and there are fewer recovery items. That alone would require so much more care and strategy and playing, and would dramatically increase my enjoyment of the game. Just a couple little lines of code and everything would be different. Length is another disappointing factor. Now, I know I can be pretty stingy, so when I'm looking at a $60 game, I'll admit sometimes I probably have slightly unrealistic expectations concerning length and amount of content. But if you ask me, this game misses the mark by a large margin. There are only 4 main worlds, including the first one, which is very small. The whole experience honestly feels like a little over half a game. It could have used 1 more world at least, but 2 or 3 more would have been really reasonable to ask for. To stretch playtime out a bit more, there are puzzle pieces everywhere which fill in these bonus pictures, and each stage has 1 exclusive big piece, so you can only complete all the pictures by getting all these big ones. Then a lot of stages have big secret switches to find which open up whole new levels. Normally, collectibles like this would indeed add a good amount of playtime, but that isn't so here. My first time through the game, I found every secret switch and nearly every big puzzle piece. I've still got a lot of pictures to fill out, but that would require just grinding levels, and I'm not super inclined to do that because the pictures themselves just aren't very interesting prizes. The game does have other content though. There are these 2 competitive mini-games, one where you chop down as much of a tree as possible, and another where you hit a meteor with a baseball bat that's very reminiscent of the Megaton Punch game in Superstar. These are kind of fun, but I guess I'm just not that into minigames like this. It's the kind of thing I play for a few minutes and then get bored with. Playing with friends is definitely more fun, but even that only lasts a few rounds before they want to move on to something else. More substantial is the boss rush mode, which has a number of difficulty settings and rewards you with puzzle pieces. It's definitely nice to have something like this if you're really craving some sort of challenge in this game. Lastly, when you beat the game, you unlock a mode where you can run through the game as one baddie, with or without friends, and as far as I can tell, there are no recovery items along the way. There's a great emphasis on speed here. The goal is to see how fast you can do it, and as such, you're not looking for any secret switches or puzzle puzzle pieces or anything. You don't even have to use the world map, it just strings the levels together for you, and you collect these little power-ups that increase your stats for the duration of each world. I'm not really into playing for good completion times, but this mode is fun because of the limitations it puts on you. It becomes something of a shallow experience, just trying your hardest to get to the end as fast as possible. Pro tip, just use the bird and you'll win forever. But the stat boosters, lack of health, and inability to change forms makes it interesting in its own way, and I just wish they had implemented those kinds of things in the main game too. In particular, the stat boosters. Like, why is that not just built into the whole campaign? That would make the game so much more interesting. But as it is, there's the overly easy story mode with all its secrets and collectibles and whatnot, the kind of thing you want to work through with your friends, and there's this mode with better gameplay, but none of that other fun stuff and nothing between. Very frustrating. It's definitely worth noting that up to this point, I've been coming at Star Allies from a single-player perspective, and as we've established, this game was built with multiplayer in mind. I did have a chance to sit down with some friends and give co-op a go, and this does make the experience a little bit more fun. One of the game's big problems is difficulty, and without a group of AI characters playing much of the game for you, things start to feel a little more like they should. You've got to coordinate a little more. Who's got what power, who's gonna use what special and when, who's gonna go jump in a cannon, that kind of stuff. And in boss battles, you've all got to try your best to avoid and deal damage. Basically, you've just got to try more. The game starts to take more actual effort to play. This slightly increases the difficulty, and it certainly increases the playtime, but I just don't feel like this helps enough. Out of curiosity, we skipped to the end of the game, and we're still able to beat the last few levels in one try. After that, the guys I was playing with were asking if we could play something else. The final aspect of Star Allies to fall short is the creative aspect. Part of this is because of the game's lack of environmental cohesion. There are a few places where the levels match the theme of the world they're in, but for the most part, it's all isolated, random little levels without much of a theme to speak of. This one's ice, that one's cave, this one's grasslands, that one's lava. And even within a level, these biomes can change seemingly at random from section to section, which breaks cohesion even further. Then the level design feels like it's been limited because of the focus on multiplayer. It's another thing where the game toys with some interesting design concepts and rarely expands on them to a satisfying degree, and overall the game is meant for 4 people to be able to crawl through it together easily. And really, if there's one thing really going against this game, it's the very final sequence, which I won't show, obviously. No, it's not because this ending sequence is bad, it's because it's fantastic. At the end of the game, the story actually starts to become interesting, and we're treated to some unique gameplay elements not found in the rest of the game. And I get that this is what makes the ending extra good, because the ending should always be special and extra good, but I came away from it being like, wait, they were capable of making that? What was the rest of the game for? The creativity on display at the end just makes the rest of the game look so underwhelming in comparison. It's a tiny glimpse into the next-gen HD blast-your-face-off Kirby that I feel like this could have been. And I know it's not exactly fair to look at the latest greatest Zelda and the latest greatest Mario and expect the same level of innovation and knock-your-socks-off hugeness from Kirby, but remembering that ending sequence, I feel like they could have done more. Like I said, I've heard a lot of people say that Kirby games are meant for casual enjoyment, they're supposed to be easy, they're largely aimed at kids, but it's hard for me to swallow this when Nintendo has built an entire empire around creating games that anyone can enjoy, that a little kid can pick up and play, but that can still offer at least some challenge and sometimes even depth for older players. And when I look at all those other games Nintendo makes, then I look back to this one, I just don't see why Kirby can't be just as fun for me as it is for a kid. The gameplay is fun, it's just got all these other elements holding it back. And even if Nintendo absolutely has their mind set on making this their kids series through and through, I don't feel like anything can excuse the lack of creativity and especially the lack of content. Even with all its extra modes and minigames, and even after hitting every hidden switch and playing every extra level and collecting nearly every big puzzle piece, I felt like I'd seen everything the game had to offer after 6 or 7 hours. Maybe 8. I mean, it's a little hard to keep track accurately, but any more than that is pushing it. Multiplayer gave me an extra hour or so, but like I said, my friend's interest didn't last beyond that. Kirby Star Allies often reminds me of Super Mario 3D World. That game was also lacking in terms of ambition and innovation, it was overly easy, and its level design was negatively impacted by its big focus on multiplayer. I gave that game a solid 5 out of 7. Nothing really special, but, you know, good fun. The difference, though, is that at least 3D World showed off some genuinely clever level design. It offered a good handful of difficult challenges, including what might be the single hardest Mario level ever, and contained 8 full worlds in the main game, with several special worlds that unlocked after the credits rolled. That game disappointed me in many ways, but it still lived up to a certain Nintendo standard. I'm not going to tell you that Kirby Star Allies stinks, and you definitely won't like it. If you're a Kirby fan and you're just into that Kirby gameplay, you'll probably have way more fun with it than I did. Similarly, if you're younger or you have kids and you just want a good, simple game, you can't go wrong here. If you're really into multiplayer, you'll probably love working through the game with your friends and competing for top scores in the minigames. And if you're not the type to compare cost to length, maybe you won't care one bit that it's only got 4 worlds as long as it's fun to play. But as a relative newcomer to the series, this game did little to pull me in. It had a chance to really sell me on Kirby. I was really open to it, and it didn't quite pull it off. If this was a 3DS game, we might be having a different conversation, but this is a Switch game, and I know Nintendo can do a lot better than this. Kirby Star Allies is a very middle-of-the-road game with many good elements and many disappointing elements, so I put it on the middle of my scale, 4 out of 7. So there you have it. I was disappointed, but it's certainly one of those games where I can appreciate a wide range of opinions. It's gonna appeal to different people in different ways. Unlike all the other Kirby games, which all stink! Just kidding, they're all probably fine. It's Kirby's fans that stink! Just kidding, they're all beautiful people.